All right, here we go. This part 2 about Rastafarianism, Rastas, Jamaica, the whole lie that is in existence now. And this is one of the top black religions, of madness coming from Satan. So what I'm doing here, as I said, part 2, I already did part 1, is I'm showing you where I get a lot of knowledge from about this concept. This brother did an in-depth, and he's breaking it down from slavery, from when the Europeans brought the slaves to the islands, and especially Jamaica. So this is part 2. I'm giving you excerpts. Okay, so we're moving into the book now. So here we go. Okay, we're going into the book. All right. So as you see clearly, man. So it says over 1 million slaves were brought to Jamaica during the period of slavery, and they were branded, right? Now let's see the madness as we turn deeper in. It says, in essence, the cows in these pens were treated better than the slaves, for the field slaves were driven. As if they were the lowest form of animal, because sugar production accounted for the bulk of labor used in the slave society. It has been the focus of research and documentation. It was a system of production like the production of tobacco and cotton in the southern states of the USA, which requires hordes of cheap labor. Okay, so if you pick up the slavery, the production process centered around the sugar factory, involving a complex system of production with 5 main stages, from the planting to the cutting of the ripe cane, the transportation of the cane to the mill, where the juice was crushed from the cane, the boiling house, where the juice was evaporated to a syrup and sugar was crystallized, the curing house, where the molasses was drained from the sugar, and the distillery, where the molasses was made into rum. So this is how they made millions of dollars, billions of dollars off of your slave labor. The process called into being a wide range of workers, from skilled slaves such as carpenters, coopers, masons, sugar boilers, distillers, to the slaves who did the most arduous tasks, the field slaves. See, I'm one of those Negroes. I'm a field slave. I ain't these kiss-ass jigaboos, wannabes, step-in fetchers, clowns, Oreos. Nah, I'm not one of those slaves. These slaves was distinct from the layer of house slaves. See that? It's a lot of us that's house slaves. The maids, butlers, cooks, gardeners, coachmen who act as spies for the master. And this is where we at now. Okay? This is where we at now. A lot of spies amongst us, man. And often the overseers, which is cops, would keep a string of mulatto women so that they were kept informed of the rumblings of the field slaves. Field slaves were expected to open at least 100 holes a day for planting the cane, and failure to do so was punished by whipping. The slaves started working at 4 a.m. The same thing that they did to us, and the Lord said we're going to do to them. And several jobs had to be completed before going to the field. These included carrying mold to the cattle pens, cutting up the dung, making mortar, carrying white lime to the works, and doing various odd jobs. It was during crop time, when the cane was reaped, that the slaves were driven to exhaustion, because it was on the plantation that the factory system was perfected in preparation for the Industrial Revolution in Europe. These estates, which could not afford jobbing gangs, worked 2 shifts, one beginning at 12 noon and the other at midnight. So you see how they still working you like a dog? The boilers and other Negroes who formed the spell about the works went to the field to cut the canes about 1:30 p.m. and continued to do so until it was too dark, about 7 p.m. They finished off carrying cane tops or grass to the cattle pens and then rested for about 4 hours. At 12 midnight, they received the spell in the boiling house and the rest of the works, which had relieved from the previous noon. The relief spell rested until 4:30 to 5 a.m., where they worked until 12 noon, at which they went to lunch and then returned to the works at 1:30 p.m., and so the cycle continued. These people is going to be worked just like they worked us. All you got to do is go to Revelation 13, 9, and 10. The Lord said, as they have done, it's going to be done unto them. Okay? The Lord is not playing with this. Let's look at this. Remember, this is only page 17 of this book. In order to maintain the pace of the 16 to 18-hour days, the overseers employed slave drivers. See that? And you still got your slave drivers amongst us now, who were armed with special whips, which, when cracked, sent a loud sound all across the field and left deep wounds in the flesh of slaves. Some of the most renowned whips were the supplejack, cat o' nine tails, bamboo switches. These drivers, themselves slaves, often abused their authority and could themselves be whipped by the overseer for not forcing enough work out of the tired slaves. See, this is why we have these same coons today. You better see what's going down, man. A lot of y'all don't want to go back into the past, but this is why our people is the way that they are today. Because slavery was not calculated to bring out the best in those who fell under its sway, whether owner or slave, the system had a debasing effect on the character of those involved. This was explicitly for those tyrants who were head gangmen or drivers. These representatives of capital in the field, along with the house slaves, were permitted with the vices of their white masters and scheming board mistresses, and they despised the slaves in the field. They internalized the ideas of their masters and were endued with self-hatred. See this is exactly where us as a people is today, because now we all split apart. Yeah, let's get into this. Apart from the physical violence, the field slave was exposed to every form of outrage and mortification to break his spirit. There was no law to protect the slave, and the institution of slavery was stamped in the color of his skin. Race prejudice was emphasized to demoralize the blacks. Despite the efforts of the apologists who try to compare black slavery with the slavery of the Roman era, they forgot that the children of Roman slaves were usually born free, and slavery was never reserved for one race. From the earliest days of Spanish occupation, indentured whites could have been seen in the fields with blacks. This was soon deemed dangerous. Color was the most obvious sign of the differentiation, and it became the legal and rational basis for keeping blacks in servitude. Slavery or bondage was deemed a natural role for blacks, and overlordship the right of the whites. See that? See that? Just opening up pages for you. The ideologues of the period refined the theory of racism when some whites assiduously maintained that Africans were not human beings, but lower form of animal ordained by God to be the white man's beast of burden. This comes from the Bible, from when Ham was born, in Genesis, the 10th chapter. Know your Bible, man. This is where they get that from. See that? Let's drop down. When in 1873 the abolitionists began their campaign, Lord North, the prime minister, reminded them that the slave trade had become a necessity to every European nation. Planters from Jamaica also told that these humanitarians that between 1790 and 1791, Jamaica sugar alone added at least 1,600,000 sterling to the balance of trade in the favor of the parent state. See that? So that's how the Queen has got millions of dollars, and y'all talking about the Queen is dead and y'all love her. See, because you are a slave inside your mind. Okay, let's drop down last part. Now, look at this. Y'all go to play basketball at the Barclay Bank. You ain't nothing but a slave, man, keeping that slave mentality. Okay? Eric Williams showed that some outstanding examples of traders, insurance brokers, and iron foundries were boomed out of sugar and slaves. The Barclay, the Barclays family, owned slave plantations in Jamaica, and it was from this accumulation that they were able to set up Barclays Bank, and you run to your slave master and you play ball for them. Y'all some sellouts, man. One of the foremost transnational banks in the 20th century. Tell you that we ain't shit. Peace.